Have you ever had this experience? Your phone rings, you look down, you see the caller ID, and the very first thought that you have is, oh no, not him. Or, I really don't have much time. Because you know that that conversation is either going to be uncomfortable or it's going to take a lot more of the time that you're willing to give at that moment. Now, we're all human, and no matter what level of leadership you're in, there's always those few individuals that just seem a little different, take a little bit more energy or more effort to work with. But as leaders, we must learn to adapt and adjust to each one of those team members. That is what successful leadership looks like. So in today's episode of PNB, we're going to go deeper into understanding why do we feel that irritation, that frustration, or feeling just uncomfortable around different individuals. In this episode, we're going to dig into how do we adapt so that you can create trust, rapport, and above all, performance. This episode is It's Personal about adapting. So let's get started. Hello, and welcome to the PNB Nation, where it is all personal, not business. I'm your host, Mr. Rico, and I will be your guide through all things people and give you in-depth insights, strategies, and the secrets to behavioral dynamics to creating a common language for understanding people in and out of the workplace. So let's get started. Now, in any workplace, in any work scenario, there are people we're going to deal with. Some people we have a natural connection to that we feel comfortable with and even higher. And there's some individuals that just seem a little different or that we feel frustrated by. And sometimes we don't even know why. Communication and when we adapt as leaders is critical in order to increase confidence and performance, and above all, trust. Now, in any workplace, you're going to have some individuals that just frustrate you. It could be their pace in which they work, or how do they do their work, or they seem to socialize more than getting their job done, or they're just too technical or detail-oriented, and you're wondering, why is that? Well, for the most part, it's because they may be opposite of your natural style, your natural ability, and how you see the world and experience the world around it. So if you happen to be more faster pace, you like getting multiple different things getting done, you're always thinking about the end result. And the other person tends to be a little bit more reserved. They tend to ask a lot more questions, or they require more feedback. Well, that is a different element. It feels different from what you're comfortable. And as leaders, it's really important that we adapt to what's comfortable to our team members, because we are professional. In an environment, you're going to be irritated and frustrated. We are human after all, especially when there's pressure, stress, or fatigue. But then you tend to learn to tolerate, to align yourself. You know this is how this person is. And for those of you who are brand new in leadership, this is one of the biggest skills you can learn. To learn what's important to that person, their pace, their language, why they do what they do without making it personal. Because at times we're so busy thinking about the end result that we forget about the interaction with that team member. So as we go through, we have to think about how do we adapt, how do we connect, how do we communicate in a manner that creates that comfort zone. Because no matter what, at any level in any organization, there are going to be individuals that frustrate and irritate us because they're not doing what we assume it should be done. I'm willing to bet that at some point in time, some of you watching this have gone through this scenario. You sat down with some team members. You've quickly explained what you need. In your mind, you were clear, and they may have even told you, yeah, we understood. You come back, and the work is not done to the standards and expectations you had. Well, one or two things happen. You assume that some of those details were common sense. And common sense to you should be common sense to them. I shouldn't have to explain what those are. But your common sense is not the same as theirs. And secondly, Depending on what's going on in the moment, if say you're, for example, you're more result oriented and you're talking to individuals that are more relationally focused, you're clear, bullet points, any questions, move on, because you're already thinking 2 and 3 steps ahead. But how you articulate it, the words that you use may not be the same ones that that team member utilizes. And they didn't want to feel stupid, or they didn't want to be embarrassed, or make you think that they didn't know what they were doing. So therefore, how they understood what you said was completely different of what they did. As leaders, we must take the opportunity to make sure that the information was clearly understood, because common sense isn't common, and how we communicate is our responsibility to make sure it was understood. But first, we have to understand ourselves. When we understand where our comfort zone for communication relating value comes from, we can now understand why there are other individuals or behaviors that tend to frustrate and irritate us. So there are 2 ways to communicate with any human being on the planet. The first is at pace. Pace is the speed and tone for which you speak. Some individuals tend to be fast paced. They think fast, they talk fast, they decide fast. They're moving at the speed of light because productivity equals motion. If we're in motion, we're being productive. They tend to also be the loudest individuals in the room. Not because they always want to have the attention, but that is their natural volume. On the other side of the spectrum, there are those individuals that tend to be a little bit more reserved. They're quiet. They think their way through things. They are analyzers, or they are taking their time to observe and not jump the gun. They are making sure that they take all the information in before they either react, communicate, or decide. Now, neither one is better or best, but just by understanding tonality, speed of how we communicate, decide, or move, we create a natural connection. It's no different than if you're listening to heavy metal and classical music. Depending on where you come from, great music. They all have their own tone, their own way of that music to sound through and how people experience it and enjoy it. How we communicate, how we connect is no different. If we hear something that is familiar, similar to how we communicate, how we've learned to feel comfortable in our environment to make that connection, we naturally feel comfortable. Most arguments and most misinterpretation of information isn't in the words that you use, is in the tone that you use. If you've ever trained a dog to sit, pay attention to the tone you use for a favorable outcome you want that dog to do versus the tone that you use when they do something you don't want them to do. Dogs do not speak the language. They react to the tone. Nose is first, but tone second. So the human beings are no different. And human beings will put immediately that individual they're communicating with at the moment they see them in one of 3 buckets. You are either friend, because we're alike in tribe and likes, comfort, language, dress, whatever it may be. Enemy, you remind them of something could be dangerous, or something internal tells them to be cautious. Or irrelevant. If you've ever walked down a busy street focusing on your phone or where you want to go, the people walking past you, unless they do something to get your attention, are irrelevant. So we have to note immediately, as leaders, employees, or even communicating with any other human being, how do I make a comfortable connection that quickly puts me in the friend bucket? Especially if you're a manager, business owner, leader, even in sales, how you initiate that conversation will create a sense of comfort. The second P, the second way we connect, is in priority. Now, priority is the topic or the focus of conversation, and do they value that topic? So we've made a connection in pace, so we either slow down or sped up based on what we observed and what we have heard. And we've made that adjustment. And now, what we say next, as we continue with that topic, will determine whether you are something of interest or irrelevant. And if you don't choose your tone and words correctly, you might even fall into the enemy bucket. So there are some individuals, especially in the work environment, are all about work, are all about the professionalism of work. In other words, they may not be so quick to talk about the weekends or their kids or vacations or non-work related, especially if you're at a meeting, results need to get it done, there's a deadline, something that is work related will always take precedence and a priority. How do we know if we're dealing with someone in that sphere? Well, are they talking about specific business or numbers, deadlines, results, tactics, logic, process, procedures? They're very tactical or strategic in the items in which they're speaking about. Now, on the other side, there are more relational individuals. Trust and comfort is built in the experience, the social interaction between those two individuals. They weigh that greater than more task or result oriented activities. How do we know we are communicating with someone from that side of the spectrum? Well, they're again talking about kids, relationships, experiences, vacations, weekends, not necessarily always about work, but also trying to make a connection with you through that social interaction. This is important to know where you are. Are you more fast paced in task or fast paced in people or more reserved in people or reserved in task? When you tend to want to make a decision or you have to get things done, are you more focused on the outcome of things? Do you get frustrated that people are not moving with a certain sense of urgency? If that sounds like you may seem that the other individuals that are a little bit more relational or reserved can appear to you to be lazy or they're not taking their job as important. And if you are the leader, you are judging others by how you would do something, and it is going to affect their performance because they're never going to meet your level of expectations because they don't see the world or perceive their roles and responsibility through the same filter as you do. This is why leaders are great listeners first in order to adapt their communication to make the other individual feel that you care, which you should, and that they're being heard. So, number one, listen and observe to the pace. Is the person who is asking the questions or responding or communicating more faster pace? And then listen to the words they're using. Are they more relational, people and experience focus? Someone that says, I feel, is more on that relational side in that part of the conversation. Someone who says, I think, tends to be more in the task. What is the descriptors that they're using to define the conversation? That allows you to determine if I'm fast paced and task oriented, and that individual looks and sounds, and I'm observing to be fast paced but relational, then I need to adjust from heavy metal to classical music so that there's a connection. You don't have to adjust the pace, but adjusting the framework of the conversation initially. Now, I know what some of your leaders are saying is, why do I need to be the one that needs to adapt? Great question. So the rule is this. In behavioral dynamics, the person who initiates the conversation is responsible for its clear understanding. There is one caveat here. If you are the manager, leader, or business owner that sets the tone for your team, then you are the one responsible, regardless of whether you started the conversation or not. You set the tone and standards. And I will tell you that if you make these adjustments, you will be able to get better performance, more communication, better engagement, and you will reduce the fires you have to deal with. Now, if you happen to be more reserved and say task oriented, talking to someone who's faster paced and people oriented, then yes, you need to speed up and you definitely need to start with social interaction because that is what they drive comfort zone. Now, if you happen to be the person that is fast paced and people oriented, talking to someone reserved and task, then get to the bottom line, get to the facts, and wait for that individual to start the social side before you do. Don't assume that they see that as important as you. For those who are fast paced and task, if you're communicating with them, bullet points, bottom lines, and then wait for a response. Leaders, if you're having a meeting and you recognize that some of your team have to be more relational, fast or reserved, but they're all about relationship, and there you have some members of your team that are more task oriented, here's a great hack to have a successful, productive meeting. First, invite your relational people, fastened people, or reserved in people 10 or 15 minutes early than the meeting should start. Create a social environment where you can talk about anything and everything. People are catching up with everybody else, families, what they're doing, all of those things. You allow that to breathe. Then at a certain time, you start and you move into the meeting. That is when your task team comes into the phone call. You have given the relational people time to interact and be social and feel comfortable and understand the environment they're in. And you are now allowing the task to have a clear meaning. So step number one, where are you in the entire sphere of connection? Are you fast or more reserved as far as pace? And are you more around task or people as it comes to priority and value to the organization? Once you do that, number two is observe, listen, and then adapt to the individuals you're speaking to. This is also true whether you have 3 or 4 people in a meeting, virtually or live. Whoever you speak to, you've observed, you make that subtle adjustment. And number 3, make sure that you're creating the appropriate environment for everyone to feel comfortable, to have an open conversation and feel comfortable with each other. By adjusting and adapting and having these kinds of conversations, or if you have an assessment report on them, you know ways to communicate, ways not to communicate in the environment, everyone can learn from each other. I hope this helps. Communication, and we're going to go deeper into some of these others and more in depth into the behavioral dynamics of these so that you as leaders, business owners, HRs, or even employees can have the inside scoop on how to connect, communicate, and build rapport with anyone that you meet. I'm Mr. Rico, and I look forward to our next episode here on PNB Nation. Make sure that you subscribe and leave a comment. Please give us what your insight is, maybe some ideas for topics that would help you in communication, leadership, or performance development so that we are talking about things that are important to you. Your subscriptions, your comments, your likes helps us to grow this particular channel so we can reach more people with this great information. Pretty soon, we're going to get some great experts that will give you kind of insights and secrets that will allow you to have great influence, persuasion, and improve your leadership style. Until then, we'll see you in the next episode.